One more speaker before lunch, and I can't think of anyone better to take us into the lunch hour than Joe Ortego. Joe is a trial lawyer's trial lawyer, and is truly one of the best. He's past chair of the network of trial law firms, is chair of Nixon Peabody's product, class action, industry, and trade representative practice group. He's defended major commercial, environmental, and toxic tort cases against financial institutions, automobile companies, and chemical companies. He's a former New York ADA under Robert Morgenthau and has a list of publications that would take us through the lunch hour if we were to read them all. He leads Nixon Peabody's trial team, which is comprised of the firm's most successful and experienced trial lawyers. He's also a member of the firm's Diversity Action Committee. He's active on pro bono matters, president of the Board of Trustees of Adults and Children with Learning and Developmental Disabilities, director of the TIPS National Trial Academy, and much, much more. Again, it's really my pleasure to introduce Joe. With Joe is Sophie Jacobs, who is an assistant district attorney under DA Cyrus Vance. Sophie was formerly with the Rackets Bureau of the office where she prosecuted a case against Scott O'Connell, against a client of Scott O'Connell, whose big law firm attorney, not a network attorney, embezzled more than $10 million. Sophie's now with the Cybercrime Bureau of that Manhattan DA's office, where she prosecutes criminals who use the internet to perpetuate their crimes. So please join me in welcoming Joe and Sophie.
We have the clicker here. Is the advanced thing here? So slide.
Isn't that it?
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here again at the network, and usually I come to scare in-house and out-house counsel, and I think I'll do the same today. But we are very fortunate, too, to have Sophie with us, because this presentation will include both someone here who prosecutes these crimes in the cybercrime unit from the office that I was very proud to be with, but I had no idea what a cybercrime was back in 1979 when I was in the Manhattan District Attorney's office, but Sophie will explain the new modern ways. But let's go back to what the issue is for us. The New York State Attorney General just recently issued a report, and it's kind of shocking in a lot of ways of what is going on with regard to privacy and cybersecurity. Between 2006 and 2013, the security breaches in New York have tripled. Over 22.8 million New Yorkers' personal information have been exposed since 2006. 2013 was even a record year for all of this. And in 2013, 7.3 million New Yorkers' personal information was exposed, and the New York State Attorney General calculates the cost for this exposure was $1.37 billion in New York. Hacking accounts for over 40% of the breaches that take place since 2006 to 2013, and the danger is well known. So the question for us is, what are we doing as in-house counsel and outside counsel? The question probably is easily answered, not enough. So today is to talk about what more we should be doing as lawyers to protect our clients. And I know my first reaction is, it's the IT's department at my law firm, it's the IT's department at the different companies to protect this information. What the hell do I know about cybersecurity? Well, you do know enough to know that you're here to mitigate your client's ability. You have to be responsible for determining compliance, compliance on a federal and state level, who to inform when the breach takes place. Do you go to the government? Is the government your friend? And what do you do to mitigate the liability? Not if this happens to you, it's more likely when this happens to you. And sticking your head in the sand is not going to be the answer. Let's talk a little about some of these issues in data. I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly with regard to data. There's a lot of good things about data. Our clients know more than ever than they know about the people they work with. If you own a store, or if you're involved in a big, large chain of stores, you know everything about your customers. And you are using that information to gain other information, to market your business, to do wonderful things. Information is power. That is the good news. And we now have more information about people and things than we ever have before. Studies have also showed that a company that has a good privacy policy has a good brand, and consumers look to that company. So that's the good part about all of this. What's the bad news? Well, the bad news is some of the data is sensitive, and with that knowledge and power, we now have duties. And part of the duties are for the lawyers to help protect the people who they have that data for. And remember, a company that has to protect the assets that it has. And the fact that you have this information is an asset to the company, and lawyers need to help our clients protect that information. What's the ugly? That the litigation involved in breaches of privacy is outrageously expensive, very difficult, and extremely damaging to your client. Think about the different companies who've had privacy breaches and data breaches, and think of what they went through and how they had to survive. And think of the cost it's cost them, both indirect and direct, for a breach. Now, not all breaches require something to be reported. A breach is defined as an event in which an individual's name plus other personal information is at risk for either an electronic or paper format. This is what people hack. This is what people are interested in. It's only personal information that you need to protect, and personal information includes many things, and it's things you know. It's information about your employees, it's information about your business partners, it's information about patients that you have in hospitals. What is the type of personal information that the regulators and the government want you to report about if it's corrupted? Social security numbers, names and addresses of people, dates of birth, account numbers, email addresses, passwords, and even zip codes. Now, when, how, and how much, and who do you have to report this when a breach takes place? You know, first of all, you have to worry about informing the victims of the breach. And how do you inform each victim? And what does the government need to know? And those are the things that you need to be asking yourself, not now, or you should have asked yourself a long time before. I want you to all think about, in the room, what your policy is with regard to your company if there's a data breach. And if you're saying, well, I don't have one, you better have one by tomorrow or get working on that, because that's your responsibility. And if you do not have that, there's only one person to blame when we don't have things and policies that are required by law. It's the lawyers, and that's what's going to happen. So you need to protect yourself, because it is, of course, the lawyers that created all these rules with regard to data and regulations. So what we really can do is, in a lot of ways, we can't stop the breach. No matter what you do, and Sophie will talk about this, we're not going to stop the breach. It's really the IT department who's going to have to come in and come up with different security methods and different encryptions and walls and firewalls to protect that. What we can do is mitigate the damages for our clients, and that's what we need to be prepared for. Advising our clients what they need to report, who they have to report it to, when they have to report it, and what they can do, and what's your plan to do if the breach takes place to mitigate the damage to our clients. First thing you need is you need an incident response plan. It sounds very simple. It's not just another plan. What are you going to do when a data breach takes place? What policies and procedures are you going to have? Do you have a PR firm on standby? Do you have a procedure on who's getting notified? Do you have someone who's going to tell you when you contact the government? Who at the government do you call? Do you run to Sophie in the New York County District Attorney's office right away? What do? You have to have a protocol in place. And usually it takes one person to do this. And why one person? You need one person to coordinate all of this. And you've got to pick that one person. And we'll talk a little later. It's not your brother-in-law, the idiot brother-in-law that you have working at your company. You have to have somebody smart to do this, because this is serious business. You need plans. You need plans to do what to do with the personal information, such as what employees have access to the information. You need to determine what employees have access to the information that you have that might be corrupted. Because as Sophie will talk to you later, a lot of this corruption and data theft and data corruption involves rogue employees. You know, that employee that you hated and that employee that everybody hated and nobody liked and then you decided to let go of, but somehow had access to information and wants their revenge or wants to get something on the company. Nobody has employees like that, do they? They're just sitting there waiting. So you've got to know who has access to the information. The IT department is in charge of protecting the information. We're in charge of compliance. And you can sit here down, we can have the best laid plans, you can have a lot of good plans here, what you want to do, but it's not if something's going to happen at your company or your client's company, it's when that happens. And you've got to think about that, because some of the best cybersecurity has been breached and people don't have plans. You need plans. The IT department will do its job and you will do yours. Knowing how to react to a breach will make a difference to your company's image and what it will cost. How quickly, if you look at the companies, and we all read the news, how quickly you respond, and how you handle the public relations aspect is critical to the company you have. Think of your client who spends millions of dollars at times trying to keep their brand out there, and think about how the Targets of the world felt when that happened. And think about how many people didn't shop at Target at Christmas time when that happened. Think about the reputation, and think how hard it is to lose that reputation once you have that. Think about how you remember Target, for example, or any other of these folks that have had these issues. I put this up here because you can do everything right and still have a problem. And the first thing that needs to be done when a breach takes place is it needs to be contained. That's the first thing you need to do. Someone has to be there to conduct an investigation to determine the scope and to contain it. Hopefully you have an incident response plan and for such a situation. And you'll go down your checklist because it's too late to create a checklist by the time the breach takes place. If you don't have one now, again, as I say, this is a great time to do that. And who is in charge of the investigation? Sometimes at a lot of these companies, they put the least capable person to do it. Brings us back to some corporate compliance. Remember what you wanted? We need a corporate compliance officer in the early days. Let's see who has nothing to do. Ah, this person has nothing to do. This is a perfect job for your brother-in-law. We're going to put him right in their compliance. Well, this is not the perfect job for your company to put your brother-in-law there. You could see I have some brother-in-laws I do not like. Are there legal implications that you will have with regard to the breach? If the breach occurred, were you in compliance with government regulations? Well, you know, you can have a plan, you can think you're in compliance, but you better check that you're in compliance while the breach is out there and you're doing your public relations. Then start thinking about who's going to help you pay for this breach. Who's going to help you? Who's out there? Well, the first thing you think about, hey, do we have insurance for such a thing? Well, there is cyber insurance. Have we looked at cyber insurance? Have we contacted our broker? The time to think about insurance is now, before the breach, not after the breach. And many folks don't have cyber insurance. And it's a complicated issue with some good products and some products that aren't that good. And then when you're in trouble and the breach takes place, it's always good to find someone else who might be responsible. Start looking for those third parties that are going to help you pay for this mess. And it sounds difficult, but it's no different than any tort case. Let's see who else can help contribute to help us. And there are a lot of third parties that are involved that are responsible to help you do this with the breach. You should know who's out there and who's responsible at the time of the breach. And the rogue employee. And I'm going to defer to Sophie on this, and she'll talk about the Grucci network attack and how that took place. And she'll go into detail about that with firsthand knowledge. But those are the issues. The rogue employee is behind a lot of these. And think about how you're going to deal with that and start thinking about the culprits that might be involved here. Time to think about privilege as well. Everybody wears different hats. How are you going to protect privilege in what you did before and what you did after? One of the ways is to partner with outside counsel and in-house counsel should partner together to create privileged information for you to protect yourself in case there is a breach from either government activity or the public as well. Okay, what do you have to do if there's a breach? Some of the simple things. New York has probably some of the strictest rules and regulations with regard to what we need to do on content and process if a breach takes place. New York requires notifications the contact information of the person making the notification, the categories of personal information that the breach affected, and the information that is reasonably believed to have been acquired. Ah, the government, your friend. When do we have to go to the government? Not everyone is as nice as Sophie, but Sophie has a limited role. When is notification required under New York law for the breaching entity to inform law enforcement agencies of the notice's timing and distribution, the content of the breach, and when appropriate, when the individuals? If more than 5,000 New York residents are notified, New York law requires the information be furnished to also consumer reporting agencies. The time to think about who to report is now. Okay, on one of the slides in your book, I have playing it safe with the FTC. The FTC has different guidelines on what you should be doing to develop security policies and training. That will be there. And at this time, I will probably turn over to Sophie, but just some suggestions that I have with you regarding what you should be doing. Awareness is your best defense. Policies are important. You get what you pay for with regard to spending money on security and overall technology. Security does not work without having smart people manage it. And with many competing regulations, you need one individual responsible. I know I crammed a lot into a short amount of time. I'm going to now turn it over to Sophie, who can tell you what happens when you do have a breach and your company has been a victim and what goes on in the New York County District Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Joe. I am from the New York County District Attorney's Office. I'm an assistant district attorney in the Cybercrime and Identity Theft Division. As Joe mentioned, the impact of cybercrime has been increasing exponentially in the last 15 years. It is endemic now in corporations, on the personal end as well, for consumers whose identities have been stolen. And the costs of cybercrime are enormous. The costs of investigating cybercrime, the costs of customer support and public relations for corporations, and potentially financial penalties and lawsuits as well. So to plug my office a little bit, Cyrus Vance, the district attorney in Manhattan, came into office and recognized that this is really where the focus of law enforcement needs to be. And because of that, he created in 2010 a full-time cybercrime and identity theft bureau, which I'm now part of. We have approximately 10 assistant district attorneys who are full-time committed to these cases, as well as about half a dozen forensic analysts in the high crime analysis unit, which is just looking at computers and phones and doing forensic analysis for our office. So we are a very nimble investigative agency, as well as being a prosecutor's office. And that is why I recommend not to detract from our federal neighbors just to the south of us, but that is why I recommend that if you have a problem that you think is worthwhile to forward to law enforcement, that you do contact us with that problem, and we are very efficient and effective at investigating them. As you can see from the map here, and from bullet point number 2, 37% of all felony complaints drafted through the New York County District Attorney's Office now involve some cybercrime or identity theft charge. So that just gives you an idea of how huge this problem currently is. I'm going to just talk briefly about one particular case that occurred in 2010 where there was a breach on the systems of Gucci Inc. This case, I think, highlights the importance of maintaining historical data, and also of the interaction between law enforcement and the private sector. As well, Joe mentioned that it's very important to keep track of disgruntled employees and to have very strong policies about what databases employees have permission to access, and that employees are not sharing passwords and are sticking with protocols as far as issuing each other licenses or credentials to get on databases within a company that they're not, that they don't specifically have access to. So in 2010, just before the shopping season, the head of Gucci US came into his office and saw this error message on his computer. That day, 3 servers of Gucci US were completely shut down because of a hack, and email accounts were deleted, inventory was deleted, and it completely disrupted the functions of the corporation for that day. Looking into this in the internal investigation, Gucci realized that one particular IP address had accessed all 3 of the affected servers, and that was a 10.IP address, which was reserved privately for Gucci VPNs. Those are the physical tokens that are used to log on to a network from outside of an office. So Gucci looked to see what VPN users within the company were actually online in the hours before the cyber attacks, and they saw this individual, John Bear. Strangely, John Bear did not appear to ever have been an employee with any kind of real identity at Gucci, and so it raised a red flag. What they did then was look at the IP address that John Bear had been using to access the VPN network, and they traced that back to this 98.IP address. Highlighting the importance of maintaining historical data, Gucci was then able to run that 98 IP address through their databases to see whether any other employee of Gucci had previously used that IP address to log in through the VPN network. And they found that, in fact, one employee by the name of Sam Yin had previously used that IP address to log in through VPN. Sam Yin was a former Gucci America network engineer. He was fired in 2010 for abusing the Gucci employee discount. And before he left, he set up a cyber alias for himself in Gucci's systems as an employee, a fictitious employee by the name of John Bear. After he left, he subsequently sent emails to the tech department at Gucci and had John Bear issued with a VPN token, which allowed him to access Gucci's networks even after he'd been fired. So the outcome here was a good one. Yin was charged with first-degree computer tampering and computer trespass, and was ultimately sentenced to 2 to 6 years of state prison time. Beyond these kinds of service interruptions, obviously Joe mentioned that hacks from the outside are endemic and very destructive. Basically, what happens is that any information that is maintained, consumer information that's maintained on websites can be taken and sold on the sub-internet, particularly on what's called carding forums, where for a very, very small price, one can buy lists and lists of credit card numbers and CVV codes. That's the security information on the back of your credit card. And then once you buy that information, you can re-encode it onto separate plastic, which allows you to present someone else's credit as though it is your own, or else to use that person's credit card information to buy goods and services online. Even if you don't have a client with a high-tech business, cybercrime is still a problem. For example, many of you have probably heard of skimming devices. Even low-tech retailers will have employees that we've seen, or rings of employees who are stealing data from customers through what appears to the customer to look very much like a regular credit card swiper. And the employee can run the credit card through this swiper and steal the customer's credit card information, again, downloading it and using it later to steal money. Again, lest you think that this is only a problem for web-based companies, in this particular instance, we had an investigation that we codenamed Coast to Coast Cash Out, and I think very much displays the national and even, well, not in this case, but potentially international rings of cyber criminals. Here, what happened involved gas stations in Texas, and unbeknownst to these gas stations, there was a master key to get inside of the pump. A group of cyber criminals obtained this key, and what they did was they put a chip inside the credit card reader at every single pump for this particular gas station. And so when the customer came and ran their credit card through to purchase their gas, the purchase went through and everything looked legitimate. Unfortunately, what happened was their credit card information was also saved to this chip. What made this very interesting was that this chip was also enabled with a Bluetooth technology, which allowed the cyber criminals not even to have to reopen those terminals at all. They would just drive by in their car and download all the credit information from their car. This case came to light when two very observant police officers in New York observed two individuals in the vestibule of an ATM trying numerous credit cards and PIN numbers, and these officers arrested and searched those individuals and saw that they had re-encoding machine blank credit cards and approximately $300,000 in cash on them. What happened in this case was that the information was being stolen from gas stations in Texas. That information was then being conveyed to buyers in New York who would re-encode credit cards and make purchases or make withdrawals of cash. The cash from those withdrawals was then being redeposited into other accounts for the purposes of laundering it, and then the cash would be withdrawn in California. So you can see that in this ring, now we have 9 individuals charged with money laundering. And this graphic gives you, again, a sense of the large geographic scope of these kinds of cases. Cyber criminals don't respect borders and boundaries or jurisdiction, and in fact, they seek to exploit jurisdictional boundaries. And finally, another threat that we've seen somewhat frequently is a threat against intellectual property. For example, some of you may have heard of the Goldman Sachs case against Mr. Alenikoff, which my office is currently prosecuting. This Flow Traders case is another example of intellectual property theft in which an Amsterdam-based proprietary trading house was employing an individual by the name of Jason Vu, who decided that he was going to quit and email himself the trading strategies and valuation algorithms belonging to Flow Traders, and he did so by uploading them to Dropbox. His plan was to start his own company using the intellectual property of Flow Traders. Thankfully, due to the great internal investigation of the company and our own follow-up criminal investigation, he is now being prosecuted in Manhattan Supreme Court. So in conclusion, I just want to reiterate what Joe said, which is that it's not a matter of if this happens to your clients, it's a matter of when. We really encourage that you not stick your heads in the sand about it, because we would like to partner together with private industry to try to create some deterrence in this area. Thank you very much.